Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca, and I want to share a story that will challenge everything you think you know about family loyalty, financial boundaries, and what happens when kindness becomes a weakness. This is the story of how my own sister stole my $47,000 wedding fund while I was planning my dream wedding, and how I discovered that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is show someone the real consequences of their choices. Trust me, you will want to stay until the end because what happened at her reception shocked everyone, including myself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Chen, and at 28 years old, I had always been what you might call the responsible one in my family. Growing up in suburban Sacramento, California, I was the daughter who never missed curfew, who graduated summa cum laude from UC Davis with a degree in accounting, and who had been working as a senior financial analyst at a respected investment firm for the past 4 years. While my friends spent their 20s traveling through Europe or changing careers every 18 months, I was methodically building the foundation for a stable, secure future. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment despite earning enough to afford something larger, drove a reliable but unremarkable Honda Civic that I had purchased with cash, and maintained a detailed budget that allocated every dollar with precision and purpose. My parents, David and Lynn Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan when I was 3 years old. They built a successful small business importing specialty electronics, working 16-hour days for the first decade, while my sister Victoria and I learned to navigate American culture largely on our own. Their sacrifice taught me the value of hard work, financial discipline, and planning for the future. The Chen family dynamic was built around traditional values of respect, education, and mutual support. As the elder daughter, I naturally assumed responsibility for setting a positive example and helping maintain family harmony. This role felt both natural and important to me, particularly as my parents aged and their business demands remained intense. My relationship with money had been shaped by watching my parents struggle during their early years in America. I remembered utility bills spread across our kitchen table while they calculated which ones could be delayed another month. I remembered wearing hand-me-down clothes and watching my parents deny themselves small luxuries so Victoria and I could participate in school activities. These memories instilled in me a deep appreciation for financial security and a determination never to experience that kind of stress as an adult. Working in financial analysis had reinforced my natural inclination toward careful money management. Every day, I reviewed investment portfolios, analyzed market trends, and advised clients on long-term financial strategies. I understood compound interest, market volatility, and the importance of emergency savings in ways that most people my age did not. My colleagues often joked about my conservative approach to personal spending, but I took pride in my financial discipline. While they bought expensive coffee drinks and ate lunch out daily, I brought homemade meals and brewed coffee in my office. While they financed new cars and designer clothes, I saved consistently and made strategic purchases with cash. This disciplined approach had allowed me to accumulate substantial savings despite being relatively early in my career. By my 28th birthday, I had built an emergency fund that could cover 8 months of expenses, contributed the maximum amount to my retirement accounts, and maintained a separate savings account specifically designated for major life goals. The wedding fund that would become central to this story had been growing steadily for 3 years. Every month, I transferred $800 into a high-yield savings account that I had opened specifically for my future wedding expenses. I researched vendors, tracked average costs for venues and photographers, and calculated exactly how much I would need to host the elegant but tasteful celebration I had been dreaming about since college. My relationship with my younger sister Victoria was complex and had been evolving throughout our adult years. 3 years my junior Victoria had always been the more creative, spontaneous, and socially popular of the Chen daughters. Where I excelled academically, she thrived in artistic pursuits and social situations that made me uncomfortable. Victoria studied graphic design at a local community college before transferring to Sacramento State University to complete her bachelor's degree. Her academic journey took longer than mine, partly because she changed majors twice, and partly because she often prioritized social activities over studying. Our parents frequently asked me to help motivate her or explain difficult concepts, establishing me as an unofficial tutor and academic mentor. After graduation, Victoria struggled to find stable employment in her chosen field. The creative industries proved highly competitive, and many positions offered irregular hours, inconsistent pay, or required skills that her education had not fully developed. She worked a series of temporary jobs while pursuing freelance graphic design projects that never quite generated sufficient income for independent living. This employment instability meant that Victoria continued living with our parents well into her 20s. While I had moved out immediately after college graduation, Victoria's bedroom remained exactly as it had been during high school, creating a dynamic where she often felt and acted younger than her actual age. Our parents, busy with their business and approaching retirement, often turned to me for guidance about Victoria's situation. They worried about her lack of financial independence, but felt uncertain about how much support to provide versus when to encourage greater self-reliance. I frequently found myself mediating between Victoria's requests for assistance and our parents' concerns about enabling dependency. Over the years, a pattern had developed where I regularly provided financial assistance to Victoria during her various career transitions and personal emergencies. These contributions began small and seemed entirely reasonable given my stable income and her temporary setbacks. The first significant loan occurred when Victoria needed funds to complete her portfolio for job applications. Professional photography and printing costs for a comprehensive design portfolio exceeded her available resources, and she approached me for help with the $800 expense. I provided the money immediately, viewing it as an investment in her career development. Similar requests followed with increasing frequency. Victoria needed help with car repairs when her aging Honda broke down during a crucial job interview period. She required assistance with professional development courses that promised to make her more competitive in the design market. She faced unexpected medical bills when a minor injury resulted in emergency room treatment not fully covered by insurance. Each individual request seemed reasonable and urgent. Victoria presented clear explanations for why the expenses were necessary and how they would contribute to her long-term stability and success. I appreciated her detailed explanations and felt confident that my assistance was helping her build toward independence rather than creating dependence. My approach to these financial contributions reflected my professional training in investment analysis. I viewed them as strategic investments in Victoria's future earning potential rather than simple gifts or charity. I tracked the amounts in a spreadsheet, noting the purpose of each contribution and maintaining informal expectations about eventual repayment when Victoria achieved financial stability. I developed sophisticated rationalizations for my regular financial support of Victoria that aligned with both my family values and my professional understanding of strategic investment. These justifications made my behavior feel not only appropriate but admirable and wise. Family loyalty provided the primary framework for my assistance. Traditional Chinese culture emphasized mutual support among family members, particularly the responsibility of successful siblings to help those who were struggling. My parents had sacrificed significantly to provide opportunities for both Victoria and me, and supporting my sister felt like honoring their efforts and maintaining family harmony. I also justified my support by comparing Victoria's situation to the broader economic challenges facing young adults in creative industries. Employment in graphic design and related fields had become increasingly competitive, with many employers expecting extensive experience for entry-level positions. Victoria's struggles reflected larger economic trends rather than personal failures, making my assistance feel like compensation for systemic unfairness. The professional development aspect of many of Victoria's requests reinforced my perception that I was making strategic investments rather than simply enabling dependency. Courses, equipment, and portfolio development all represented legitimate business expenses that could enhance her earning potential. I told myself that successful entrepreneurs often required initial capital investment, and I was providing seed funding for Victoria's creative career. My own financial security made the individual amounts feel insignificant compared to the potential impact on Victoria's life. $800 represented less than I spent on groceries in 2 months, but it could make the difference between Victoria getting a job or remaining unemployed. The asymmetry between the cost to me and the benefit to her made saying no feel unnecessarily selfish. Despite my carefully constructed justifications, subtle warning signs indicated that my support pattern might be creating unintended consequences. These signs were initially easy to dismiss or rationalize away, but they planted seeds of doubt that would later grow into serious concerns. Victoria's financial requests had gradually increased in both frequency and amount over the 3 years since her college graduation. What began as occasional emergency assistance had evolved into regular monthly supplements to her income. The pattern suggested that my support was not helping her achieve greater independence, but rather maintaining a level of dependence that prevented her from developing her own financial resilience. The nature of Victoria's expenses also raised subtle concerns. While she consistently presented her needs as professional development or emergency requirements, I occasionally noticed purchases that seemed inconsistent with someone experiencing genuine financial hardship. New clothes, restaurant meals with friends, and entertainment expenses appeared on her social media accounts during periods when she had requested help with basic living costs. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria's conversations about employment and career development had also shifted in ways that concerned me. Rather than discussing strategies for building her client base or improving her skills, she increasingly focused on external factors that prevented her success. Economic conditions, client unreliability, and industry competition dominated her explanations for lack of progress, while personal responsibility and strategic planning received minimal attention. Most troubling was Victoria's apparent lack of progress toward financial independence, despite substantial assistance over several years. I had provided over $15,000 in various forms of support, yet her employment situation remained as unstable as when she first graduated. If my investments were strategic and effective, Victoria should have been showing measurable progress towards self-sufficiency. The wedding fund that would become central to this story represented 3 years of careful saving and planning for one of the most important days of my life. My engagement to Michael Thompson, a civil engineer whom I had met through mutual friends, had provided focus and urgency to my long-term financial planning. Michael and I had been dating for 2 years before he proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. Our relationship was built on shared values of financial responsibility, career ambition, and family commitment. We both understood the importance of starting our marriage on solid financial ground rather than beginning with debt or unrealistic expectations about lifestyle. Our wedding planning process reflected these shared values. Rather than seeking the most elaborate celebration possible, we focused on creating a meaningful experience that honored our families and traditions while remaining within reasonable financial boundaries. We researched vendors carefully, compared prices systematically, and made decisions based on value rather than status or social pressure. The $47,000 I had saved represented careful calculation of our actual needs and preferences. This amount would cover venue rental, catering, photography, flowers, music, and all other essential elements of our celebration. We had deliberately chosen a budget that would not require loans or family contributions, maintaining our financial independence while creating the wedding we genuinely wanted. My approach to wedding planning had impressed both our families and friends. While many couples our age went into debt or relied heavily on parental support for their celebrations, Michael and I demonstrated that careful planning and disciplined saving could create beautiful results without financial stress or compromise. As part 1 of this series concludes, I want you to understand that I genuinely believed I was living according to strong moral principles and family values. I saw myself as successful, responsible, and generous. I took pride in my ability to support my family while building my own secure future, and I felt that my financial success was meaningless unless it could benefit the people I loved most. The pattern of supporting Victoria had become so routine that I budgeted for it like any other monthly expense. I maintained detailed records of my contributions, not to monitor or control her behavior, but to ensure that I was being fair and consistent in my assistance. I told myself that successful families supported each other through difficult transitions, and that my temporary financial help was building the foundation for Victoria's long-term success. What I had not yet recognized was that my pattern of financial rescue was creating dependency rather than solving underlying problems. I was treating symptoms rather than addressing causes, enabling behaviors that prevented Victoria from developing the skills and habits necessary for genuine financial independence. Most critically, I was about to discover that my generosity had created expectations and entitlements that would ultimately threaten the most important goal I had ever saved for. The story you will hear over the next 18 parts is about recognizing these patterns, confronting the devastating consequences of enabling behavior, and learning to distinguish between supporting someone and creating dependence. It is about discovering that true love sometimes requires allowing people to face the natural consequences of their choices, even when those consequences create short-term pain. The transformation ahead would test every belief I held about family loyalty, personal responsibility, and the difference between helping and enabling. It would force me to examine my own motivations and confront the possibility that my generosity was serving my psychological needs more than Victoria's actual development. Most importantly, this journey would teach me that empowering others to solve their own problems is more valuable than solving those problems for them. The events that would unfold around my wedding planning would challenge everything I thought I knew about my sister, my family, and myself. They would reveal the true cost of financial enabling and demonstrate that sometimes the most loving response to betrayal is holding people accountable for their actions with dignity and strength. As we continue this series, I invite you to examine your own family relationships and consider whether your acts of generosity are building strength in others or creating dependence. The lessons ahead will challenge you to redefine what it means to support family members, to love unconditionally while maintaining appropriate boundaries, and to respond to betrayal in ways that promote growth rather than perpetuating dysfunction. The wedding fund that I had so carefully accumulated would become the catalyst for the most important lessons of my adult life about respect, boundaries, and the difference between being kind and being walked over. The journey from financial doormat to empowered woman would begin with the most shocking betrayal I could have imagined, and it would end with a transformation that would benefit not only me but ultimately my entire family system. The pattern of Victoria's financial dependence on me had developed so gradually over the 18 months following her college graduation that neither of us recognized how fundamentally it had altered our relationship dynamic. What began as occasional emergency assistance evolved into a sophisticated system of regular financial support that had become as predictable as my monthly mortgage payment. Victoria's initial requests had possessed an urgency and specificity that made them seem entirely reasonable. Her car required immediate transmission repairs to remain operational for job interviews. Her laptop crashed during final exams, necessitating emergency replacement to complete her portfolio. Medical expenses from a skiing accident exceeded her insurance coverage, creating unexpected debt that threatened her credit rating. Each situation presented genuine problems requiring immediate solutions, and I possessed both the resources and the family connection that made my assistance logical and appropriate. However, as months passed, the nature of Victoria's requests began shifting in subtle but significant ways. Emergency repairs and unexpected expenses gave way to what she categorized as professional development opportunities and lifestyle maintenance requirements. She needed funds to attend design conferences that promised networking opportunities with potential clients. She required assistance purchasing professional software subscriptions that would allow her to compete for higher-paying projects. She sought support for maintaining her appearance and wardrobe at levels appropriate for client meetings and professional presentations. My training in financial analysis had taught me to examine patterns and trends over time rather than evaluating individual transactions in isolation. Yet somehow I failed to apply this analytical approach to Victoria's increasing dependence on my financial support. I continued treating each request as a discrete event rather than recognizing the systematic nature of her reliance on my assistance. This analytical blindness would later seem almost inexplicable, but at the time, my emotional investment in Victoria's success prevented objective evaluation of our financial relationship. The amounts Victoria requested gradually increased as her comfort level with asking for help grew stronger. Initial requests for $200 or $300 evolved into regular needs for $800 to $1,200 monthly. These larger amounts reflected what Victoria described as more substantial professional development opportunities, but they also indicated her growing expectations about the level of support I would provide. Victoria developed sophisticated presentation techniques for her financial requests that demonstrated clear understanding of my professional background and decision-making processes. She provided detailed budgets showing how requested funds would be allocated, market research supporting the value of proposed investments, and projected timelines for achieving financial independence through the opportunities my support would enable. These presentations made her requests feel like legitimate business proposals rather than personal financial assistance. My willingness to provide increasingly substantial financial support required developing elaborate justification systems that aligned my behavior with my professional expertise and personal values. These rationalizations became increasingly complex as the amounts and frequency of Victoria's requests grew beyond what objective analysis would have supported. Family obligation provided the primary framework for justifying my continued assistance. Traditional Chinese culture emphasized the responsibility of successful family members to support those who were struggling, particularly when that support could help struggling members achieve their own success. My parents had sacrificed significantly to provide educational opportunities for both Victoria and me, and supporting my sister felt like honoring their investment and maintaining family harmony. I also rationalized my support by comparing Victoria's situation to broader economic challenges facing young adults in creative industries. The graphic design field had become increasingly competitive, with many employers expecting extensive experience for entry-level positions while offering minimal training or development support. Economic research supported the reality that creative professionals often required longer periods to establish stable income sources compared to traditional career paths. My assistance compensated for these structural disadvantages rather than enabling personal weaknesses or poor decision-making. The professional development focus of many of Victoria's requests reinforced my perception that I was making strategic investments rather than simply providing charity. Business courses, software purchases, equipment upgrades, and networking opportunities all represented legitimate professional expenses that could enhance Victoria's earning potential and competitive positioning. I told myself that successful entrepreneurs often required initial capital investment, and I was providing seed funding for Victoria's creative business development. My own financial security made the individual amounts feel manageable compared to the potential impact on Victoria's career trajectory. Monthly contributions of $800 to $1,200 represented less than 15% of my take-home income, while they could make the difference between Victoria pursuing promising opportunities or remaining trapped in low-paying temporary employment. The asymmetry between the cost to me and the potential benefit to her made refusing assistance feel unnecessarily selfish and short-sighted. Despite my carefully constructed justifications and Victoria's detailed presentations about professional development opportunities, objective analysis of her career progress revealed troubling patterns that contradicted our shared narrative about strategic investment and temporary support. Victoria's employment situation had not improved substantially during the 18 months since I began providing regular financial assistance. She continued working the same series of temporary and part-time positions that had characterized her employment immediately after graduation. The professional development courses, networking events, and equipment purchases that I had funded had not translated into measurable improvements in her job prospects or earning potential. More concerning was Victoria's apparent lack of strategic focus in her career development efforts. Rather than concentrating on building expertise in specific areas of graphic design or developing relationships with particular types of clients, she pursued diverse opportunities that seemed more related to personal interest than professional advancement. Photography workshops, social media marketing courses, and web development training all appeared on the list of professional development activities I had funded, but they did not coalesce into a coherent career strategy. Victoria's client base remained small and unstable despite my investment in her professional development activities. She occasionally secured freelance projects, but these rarely led to ongoing relationships or referrals that would indicate growing professional reputation. Her inability to build sustainable client relationships suggested either inadequate skills, poor professional practices, or insufficient commitment to the demanding relationship management that successful freelance work required. The financial returns on my investment in Victoria's professional development were virtually non-existent. Despite receiving over $20,000 in support over 18 months, Victoria's monthly income remained irregular and insufficient for independent living. If my contributions were truly strategic investments in her career advancement, basic business metrics would have shown some evidence of progress toward financial self-sufficiency. As Victoria became accustomed to my regular financial support, a subtle but significant lifestyle inflation occurred that undermined the emergency assistance narrative that had originally justified my help. What began as support for genuine crises evolved into subsidization of lifestyle choices that Victoria could not independently afford. Victoria's social media presence during this period revealed consumption patterns that seemed inconsistent with someone experiencing genuine financial hardship. Restaurant meals, entertainment activities, clothing purchases, and travel experiences appeared regularly in her posts during periods when she had requested assistance with basic living expenses. While none of these individual purchases was extremely expensive, their cumulative effect suggested discretionary spending that would have been impossible without my financial support. Her living arrangements also reflected lifestyle expectations that exceeded her earning capacity. Rather than seeking shared housing or less expensive accommodations that would reduce her monthly expenses, Victoria continued occupying her childhood bedroom in our parents' house, while maintaining social and professional activities typical of someone with substantially higher income. My financial support enabled this comfortable arrangement while preventing the natural consequences that might have motivated different choices. Victoria's transportation needs provided another example of lifestyle inflation enabled by my assistance. When her aging Honda required expensive repairs, I helped cover the costs rather than exploring less expensive alternatives like public transportation or purchasing a less expensive used vehicle. My support allowed Victoria to maintain transportation standards that her income could not sustain, preventing the lifestyle adjustments that financial independence would have required. The professional development activities that I funded often included elements that seemed more related to lifestyle preferences than career necessity. Conference attendance included expensive hotel stays and meals rather than budget alternatives that would have achieved the same networking objectives. Equipment purchases emphasized latest model technology rather than functional alternatives that would have met her professional needs at lower cost. These choices suggested that Victoria viewed my support as enabling comfortable professional development rather than strategic investment in essential career advancement. As Victoria's dependence on my financial support increased, the nature of our communication began shifting in ways that reflected changing power dynamics and mutual expectations. These communication changes provided early warning signs about problematic relationship patterns that were developing around our financial arrangements. Victoria's requests for assistance became more frequent and less detailed as her comfort level with asking for help increased. Initial requests had included extensive explanations about specific needs, plans for using requested funds, and expressions of gratitude for my willingness to help. Later requests became shorter and more casual, often presented as brief text messages or phone calls that assumed my assistance rather than requesting it carefully. The language Victoria used when asking for help also evolved from expressions of emergency need to discussions of professional opportunities that required immediate action. Rather than describing financial crises that threatened her basic welfare, she began framing requests around time-sensitive opportunities that would be lost without immediate funding. This linguistic shift transformed my assistance from emergency relief to investment partnership, changing the emotional dynamics around our financial relationship. Victoria's expressions of gratitude became more perfunctory and less specific as regular assistance became routine. Early instances of help had generated detailed thank you messages acknowledging the sacrifice involved in my support and promising eventual repayment when her situation improved. Later expressions of appreciation became brief acknowledgments that seemed to reflect obligation rather than genuine appreciation. Most troubling was Victoria's increasing tendency to discuss her financial needs and professional challenges as family problems requiring family solutions rather than personal responsibilities requiring individual action. She began including our parents in conversations about her career development needs, presenting my financial support as family investment in her success rather than personal assistance between sisters. This reframing created subtle pressure for continued support while diffusing responsibility for outcomes across multiple family members. Our parents' awareness of my financial support for Victoria created additional pressure and complexity around continuing assistance. Their involvement transformed what had begun as a private arrangement between sisters into a family system that reinforced Victoria's dependence, while increasing my sense of obligation to maintain support. David and Lynn Chen had always worried about Victoria's financial instability, but felt uncertain about appropriate levels of support versus encouragement toward independence. Their busy professional lives and approaching retirement made them particularly appreciative of my willingness to assist Victoria during her career development period. They viewed my support as evidence of strong family values and successful sisterly relationships. However, my parents' gratitude for my assistance created subtle expectations about continued support that made reducing or eliminating help feel like disappointing family values rather than encouraging Victoria's independence. Family dinners increasingly included discussions of Victoria's professional progress and ongoing challenges, with implicit understanding that my financial support enabled her pursuit of career opportunities that would otherwise be impossible. Our parents began incorporating my assistance to Victoria into their own financial planning, viewing my support as a family resource that reduced pressure on their retirement savings while helping Victoria achieve professional success. This integration created systemic dependence that extended beyond Victoria herself, to include parental expectations about family financial relationships. The cultural context of family obligation made questioning the sustainability or effectiveness of my support feel like challenging fundamental values rather than implementing practical financial boundaries. Traditional expectations about successful family members supporting struggling relatives created moral framework that discouraged objective analysis of whether my assistance was actually helping Victoria achieve independence. My professional background in financial analysis led me to maintain detailed records of my assistance to Victoria, tracking amounts, purposes, and projected outcomes with the same systematic approach I used for client investment portfolios. However, this tracking system became a tool for self-deception rather than objective evaluation of my support effectiveness. I categorized Victoria's requests according to purpose, separating emergency assistance from professional development investment and lifestyle support. This categorization allowed me to view most of my contributions as strategic investments rather than charitable gifts, maintaining the illusion that I was building toward Victoria's financial independence rather than subsidizing ongoing dependence. My tracking system included projected timelines for Victoria's achievement of financial self-sufficiency based on the professional development activities that my support enabled. These projections consistently proved overly optimistic, but I adjusted timelines rather than questioning the fundamental assumptions underlying my investment strategy. Each delay or setback received logical explanation that preserved the narrative of strategic investment toward inevitable success. The detailed records I maintained also served psychological functions that reinforced my willingness to continue providing assistance. Seeing the cumulative amount of my investment created emotional commitment to achieving positive outcomes, rather than objective assessment of likelihood for success. The psychological principle of escalating commitment influenced my decision-making, making each additional contribution feel necessary to protect previous investments rather than evaluating each request independently. Most deceptively, my tracking system focused on inputs rather than outputs, measuring my generosity and Victoria's opportunities rather than actual results in terms of career advancement or financial progress. This input focus allowed me to feel satisfied about my contributions while avoiding uncomfortable recognition that outcomes did not justify continued investment. The gradual increase in frequency and amount of Victoria's requests created systematic erosion of financial boundaries that I had not consciously recognized or agreed to eliminate. This boundary erosion occurred so gradually that I did not notice how fundamentally my financial relationship with Victoria had changed, from occasional assistance to regular subsidization. Initial boundaries around my assistance had included clear limits on frequency, amount, and purposes for which I would provide support. Emergency assistance was distinguished from professional development investment, which was separate from lifestyle support. These categories helped me maintain sense of control over my financial contributions, while ensuring that assistance served constructive purposes rather than enabling dependency. However, Victoria's skill in presenting diverse requests within acceptable categories gradually expanded the scope of assistance I was willing to provide. Professional development opportunities included increasingly broad range of activities, while emergency assistance encompassed progressively less urgent situations. The boundaries between categories became increasingly blurred, as Victoria's presentations emphasized professional benefits of lifestyle and personal expenditures. The emotional manipulation techniques that Victoria employed, whether conscious or unconscious, also contributed to boundary erosion by making refusal feel cruel or unsupportive, rather than financially prudent. Her requests often emphasized urgency, opportunity costs of delay, and family support expectations in ways that made saying no feel like betraying sisterly relationships rather than maintaining reasonable financial limits. My own psychological investment in Victoria's success created internal pressure to continue expanding support when previous assistants had not achieved projected outcomes. Rather than recognizing that ineffective strategies should be abandoned, I felt obligated to provide additional support to justify previous investments and maintain hope for eventual success. By the end of 18 months of regular financial support for Victoria, multiple warning signs had accumulated that should have prompted serious reevaluation of our financial relationship. These signs indicated that my assistance was creating dependency rather than building toward independence, but my emotional investment prevented objective recognition of problematic patterns. Victoria's financial situation had not improved, despite receiving substantial assistance, suggesting that my support was treating symptoms rather than addressing underlying causes of her employment and income instability. Her continued requests for help with the same types of expenses indicated that previous assistants had not created lasting solutions or taught financial management skills. The increasing size and frequency of Victoria's requests indicated escalating expectations about my financial support rather than progress toward independence. Her comfort level with asking for help had grown stronger rather than weaker over time, suggesting that assistance was creating entitlement rather than motivating self-sufficiency. Victoria's lifestyle choices continued reflecting consumption patterns that exceeded her earning capacity, indicating that my support was enabling unrealistic expectations rather than encouraging adjustment to her actual financial circumstances. Her resistance to reducing expenses or accepting less comfortable living arrangements suggested that my assistance was preventing natural consequences that might motivate better decision-making. Most concerning was Victoria's apparent lack of urgency about achieving financial independence despite my substantial and ongoing support. Rather than using my assistance as temporary relief while building toward self-sufficiency, she seemed to have integrated my support into her long-term financial planning as a permanent resource rather than emergency assistance. The foundation for the crisis that would eventually threaten my wedding fund had been carefully laid through this 18-month period of escalating financial support and eroding boundaries. Victoria's growing dependence on my assistance, combined with my emotional investment in her success and my family's expectations about continued support, created conditions where my financial resources would eventually be viewed as family assets rather than personal savings designated for specific purposes. The transformation that would begin with the theft of my wedding fund had its roots in this period of well-intentioned but ultimately destructive financial enabling. The lessons I would learn about boundaries, family relationships, and the difference between helping and harming would emerge from recognizing how my generosity had created the very problems I had tried to solve. Understanding why I had become Victoria's primary financial support system required examining psychological patterns that extended far beyond simple sisterly affection or family obligation. The compulsion to rescue Victoria from every financial difficulty served complex emotional needs that I had never consciously acknowledged, needs that were ultimately more about my own psychological well-being than her actual benefit. My identity as the successful, responsible Chen daughter had become inextricably linked to my ability to solve problems for family members. From childhood, I had derived self-worth from being the daughter who never caused worry, who achieved academic excellence, and who could be relied upon to help maintain family stability. This identity provided deep satisfaction and social validation, but it also created psychological dependence on being needed by others. The financial aspect of my support for Victoria was particularly seductive because it produced immediate, measurable results that validated my competence and importance. When I transferred money to Victoria's account, her financial crisis was solved instantly. Her gratitude was immediate and effusive. The cause-and-effect relationship between my action and her relief created a powerful psychological reward that reinforced my behavior far more effectively than the delayed and ambiguous rewards of emotional support or advice. My professional success in financial analysis had created additional psychological investment in my ability to solve monetary problems for others. Every day at work, I analyzed complex financial situations and provided strategic recommendations that helped clients achieve their goals. Applying these same skills to Victoria's situation felt like natural extension of my professional competence, and her financial challenges provided opportunities to demonstrate expertise in ways that felt both meaningful and important. The contrast between my financial security and Victoria's ongoing struggles also provided subtle ego gratification that I was reluctant to acknowledge. While I would never have consciously wished difficulties upon my sister, her dependence on my assistance confirmed the value of my conservative financial approach and validated my life choices. Her gratitude and admiration served as constant reminders of my success and competence. Most significantly, my role as Victoria's financial rescuer provided sense of control and purpose that was deeply satisfying on psychological level. Professional life often involved ambiguous situations and long-term projects where success was difficult to measure immediately. Supporting Victoria offered clear problems with obvious solutions, creating opportunities for immediate impact and recognition that were psychologically rewarding in ways that my regular work rarely provided. Over the 18 months of regular financial support for Victoria, my role as her financial rescuer had become so central to my self-concept that questioning this behavior felt like questioning my fundamental identity. The helpful, generous, successful sister was not simply something I did. It had become something I was, making any consideration of reduced support feel like losing myself rather than changing behavior. This identity integration was reinforced by positive feedback from multiple sources within my social and family circles. Our parents regularly praised my generosity and responsibility, often comparing my supportive behavior favorably to other families where siblings were less connected or helpful. Friends commented admiringly on my close relationship with Victoria and my willingness to help family members during difficult times. Professional colleagues respected my family values and financial responsibility, viewing my support for Victoria as evidence of strong character and priorities. The identity of financial rescuer also provided clear role definition within family dynamics that felt comfortable and important. Traditional Chinese culture emphasized respect for family hierarchy and mutual obligation, making my support for younger family members feel like fulfilling cultural expectations rather than personal choice. This cultural framework provided additional validation for behavior that might otherwise have seemed excessive or inappropriate. However, the psychological investment in maintaining this identity created powerful resistance to any information or feedback that suggested my approach might be problematic. Questioning whether my financial support was truly helping Victoria required considering the possibility that my carefully constructed self-image was based on flawed assumptions, a prospect that felt threatening to my fundamental sense of self-worth and competence. The financial tracking and analysis I performed on my support for Victoria served partially as elaborate justification system designed to protect this identity rather than objective evaluation of effectiveness. By framing my assistance as strategic investment rather than charitable giving, I could maintain perception of myself as competent financial professional rather than enabler of dependency. Most dangerously, the identity integration meant that Victoria's continued financial struggles provided ongoing validation of my importance and necessity in her life. Her independence would have eliminated my role as financial rescuer, creating unconscious psychological incentive to maintain dynamics that kept her dependent rather than truly supporting her path towards self-sufficiency. Beneath my rational explanations for continued financial support of Victoria lay deeper fears that drove my behavior in ways I had not consciously recognized. These fears were so fundamental to my psychological well-being that confronting them felt more threatening than continuing to provide assistance, despite mounting evidence of its ineffectiveness. The primary fear motivating my financial support was that without my ability to help Victoria, she would not value our relationship sufficiently to maintain close connection as we both matured into independent adults. My assistance felt like insurance against the possibility that Victoria might drift away or prioritize other relationships if I could not offer tangible benefits beyond ordinary sisterly affection. This fear was rooted in childhood dynamics where my value within the family had been clearly linked to my helpful behavior and academic achievement. While Victoria received attention and affection for her creativity and social charm, I earned recognition through responsibility and service to others. The pattern established during our youth created lasting concern that my personality and interests alone were insufficient to maintain meaningful relationships without ongoing demonstration of usefulness. I also harbored deep fear that refusing financial assistance would reveal me as selfish or uncaring, fundamentally altering how family members and friends perceived my character. Having established myself as the generous, helpful family member, saying no to requests for help felt like betraying the identity that others expected and admired. The social cost of setting financial boundaries seemed higher than the monetary cost of continued assistance. The fear of Victoria's potential failure provided another powerful motivator for continued financial support. If I refused assistance and Victoria's career or financial situation deteriorated significantly, I would bear psychological responsibility for outcomes that my help might have prevented. The possibility of future regret about failing to support my sister during critical periods felt worse than the certainty of ongoing financial obligation. Most paralyzing was the fear that examining my motivations too closely would reveal that my generosity was more self-serving than altruistic. Recognizing that my financial support served my own psychological needs as much as Victoria's practical needs would have required confronting uncomfortable truths about my character and motivations that I was not prepared to face. The neurochemical rewards associated with providing financial assistance to Victoria had created addiction-like patterns that operated below the level of conscious awareness. Each successful rescue generated complex psychological payoffs that reinforced my behavior far more powerfully than rational analysis of long-term consequences. The immediate gratitude Victoria expressed when I provided assistance triggered release of neurochemicals associated with social bonding and personal significance. Her relief and appreciation created biochemical reward that was both pleasurable and addictive, generating unconscious desire to recreate these experiences through continued financial support. The problem-solving aspect of Victoria's financial requests also provided intellectual stimulation and competence validation that was psychologically satisfying. Analyzing her situation, developing solutions, and implementing assistance plans engaged my professional skills in ways that felt meaningful and important. The complexity of her financial challenges provided opportunities for creative problem-solving that were often more engaging than routine work responsibilities. My role as financial rescuer also generated a sense of moral superiority that was subtly gratifying on a psychological level. Helping others, particularly family members, aligned with cultural and religious values that made my behavior feel virtuous and admirable. This moral validation provided ongoing psychological reward that reinforced continued assistance even when practical results were disappointing. The power dynamics inherent in financial assistance relationships also provided psychological gratification that I was reluctant to acknowledge. Victoria's dependence on my support created implicit recognition of my success and competence, while establishing clear hierarchy within our relationship that placed me in position of authority and control. Most insidiously, the ongoing nature of Victoria's financial needs provided renewable source of psychological rewards that created incentive to maintain rather than resolve her underlying problems. Her independence would have eliminated my opportunities for rescue and the associated psychological benefits, creating unconscious motivation to provide assistance in ways that addressed immediate symptoms rather than fundamental causes. My psychological investment in being Victoria's financial rescuer had created sophisticated unconscious mechanisms that prevented recognition of how my assistance was actually hindering her development, rather than supporting it. These mechanisms operated automatically to protect my self-image and maintain comfortable relationship dynamics, while preventing honest evaluation of my behavior's long-term consequences. Selective attention patterns caused me to focus primarily on Victoria's immediate relief and gratitude when I provided assistance, while minimizing or ignoring evidence that my support was not producing lasting improvements in her situation. Her expressions of appreciation felt meaningful and important, while her continued financial struggles seemed like separate issues, unrelated to my intervention methods. Rationalization frameworks automatically generated logical explanations for any evidence that suggested my approach might be problematic. Victoria's lack of progress toward financial independence was attributed to external economic conditions, industry challenges, or insufficient time for my investments to produce results, rather than fundamental flaws in my support strategy. Projection mechanisms caused me to attribute Victoria's continued financial dependence to her personal limitations or external circumstances, rather than examining how my assistance might be preventing her from developing necessary skills and motivation for self-sufficiency. This externalization protected my self-image while preventing recognition of my contribution to ongoing problems. Cognitive dissonance reduction processes automatically minimized conflicts between my stated goal of helping Victoria achieve independence and the reality that my assistance was creating greater dependence. When these conflicts became too obvious to ignore, I adjusted my expectations and timelines rather than questioning my fundamental approach. Most destructively, compensation mechanisms caused me to increase rather than decrease my financial support when previous assistance failed to produce expected results. Rather than recognizing ineffective strategies, I interpreted poor outcomes as evidence that Victoria needed more help rather than different kinds of support. The cultural context of traditional Chinese family values provided powerful external validation for my financial support of Victoria that made questioning this behavior feel like betraying fundamental cultural principles, rather than implementing practical boundaries. This cultural framework created additional psychological resistance to changing behavior patterns that felt aligned with ancestral wisdom and family traditions. Filial piety and family obligation concepts emphasized responsibility of successful family members to support those who were struggling, particularly when such support could help struggling members achieve their own success. My assistance to Victoria felt like fulfilling cultural expectations that had guided previous generations of Chen family members through various challenges and transitions. The immigrant family experience had created additional psychological investment in family unity and mutual support as essential survival strategies. My parents' success in building business and establishing family in America had required extensive mutual support and sacrifice, making my assistance to Victoria feel like continuation of family patterns that had proven essential for prosperity and security. Social validation from friends and extended family members reinforced my perception that financial support for Victoria represented admirable family values rather than enabling behavior. Comments about my generosity and family loyalty provided ongoing external confirmation that my approach was morally correct and socially appropriate. Professional social circles also provided validation for my family support behavior through cultural appreciation for strong family values and financial responsibility. Colleagues respected my commitment to family welfare and my ability to provide assistance without compromising my own financial security, viewing my behavior as evidence of successful life management and strong character. The broader cultural narrative about family support during economic challenges provided additional framework for justifying continued assistance to Victoria. Media coverage of young adult financial struggles and cultural discussions about supporting family members during career transitions made my behavior seem not only appropriate but socially necessary and commendable. The financial support patterns I had established with Victoria were driven by subconscious beliefs about personal worth, relationship dynamics, and family obligation that operated below conscious awareness but exerted powerful influence over my decision-making processes. These beliefs had developed during childhood and early adulthood experiences, but had never been explicitly examined or challenged. Core beliefs about personal worth were fundamentally connected to my ability to help others solve problems and provide resources during difficult periods. Self-esteem was unconsciously linked to being needed and appreciated by family members, creating psychological dependency on others, gratitude and recognition for my assistance. Relationship beliefs centered around assumption that love and connection required demonstration through tangible assistance, rather than simple emotional support or presence. The idea that people would maintain affection and loyalty based on personal qualities rather than practical benefits felt uncertain and risky, compared to clear demonstration of value through financial support. Family obligation beliefs emphasized responsibility to prevent suffering among family members, regardless of whether such prevention actually served long-term interests of struggling individuals. The concept that allowing family members to experience natural consequences of poor decisions might ultimately benefit their development felt cruel and contrary to family loyalty principles. Success beliefs connected my professional and financial achievements to moral obligation to share resources with less fortunate family members. The idea that personal success created responsibility to support others provided meaning and purpose, but also created guilt about enjoying benefits of hard work and careful planning. Control beliefs centered around assumption that providing financial resources would influence outcomes and behaviors in predictable ways. The possibility that my assistance might actually prevent positive change or enable destructive patterns challenged fundamental assumptions about cause and effect relationships in human behavior. My psychological investment in maintaining financial support for Victoria had created elaborate defense mechanism architecture designed to protect my self-image and behavior patterns from information that might suggest need for change. These mechanisms operated automatically and unconsciously to preserve comfortable dynamics while preventing growth and adaptation. Denial mechanisms prevented conscious recognition of evidence that my assistance was creating dependence rather than building toward independence. Victoria's continued financial struggles and increasing comfort with requesting help were reframed as temporary setbacks rather than indicators of problematic relationship dynamics. Rationalization mechanisms generated sophisticated explanations for any outcomes that contradicted my expectations about the effectiveness of financial support. Economic conditions, industry challenges, timing issues, and external circumstances provided convenient explanations for poor results, while protecting core assumptions about my approach. Intellectualization mechanisms transformed emotional family dynamics into analytical financial planning exercises that felt comfortable and controllable. By treating Victoria's situation as investment portfolio requiring strategic management, I could avoid confronting emotional aspects of enablement and dependency. Displacement mechanisms redirected anxiety about Victoria's lack of progress toward external targets such as economic conditions or industry problems, rather than examining my own contribution to ongoing difficulties. This displacement protected my self-image while preventing necessary self-reflection. Compartmentalization mechanisms allowed me to maintain professional expertise in financial analysis while applying completely different standards to family financial relationships. The analytical skills that served me well in professional contexts were somehow suspended when evaluating my personal financial assistance patterns. By the time Victoria's requests for assistance had become routine monthly expectations rather than occasional emergency interventions, multiple psychological pressures were building toward inevitable crises that would force conscious examination of patterns I had been unconsciously maintaining. These pressures were creating cognitive dissonance that was becoming increasingly difficult to resolve through existing defense mechanisms. The financial costs of supporting Victoria were beginning to impact my own long-term financial goals in ways that could not be indefinitely ignored or rationalized. My wedding fund growth had slowed significantly as monthly assistance to Victoria increased, creating tension between family obligation and personal planning that required eventual resolution. The effectiveness questions surrounding my assistance were becoming more difficult to dismiss as temporary setbacks or external complications. 18 months of support had produced minimal measurable progress toward Victoria's financial independence, challenging core assumptions about the value and appropriateness of my approach. Professional cognitive dissonance was increasing as my analytical skills in work contexts highlighted patterns in Victoria's situation that my personal emotional investment prevented me from acknowledging. The gap between my professional competence and personal blind spots was creating psychological tension that demanded resolution. Social feedback was beginning to include subtle questions and concerns about Victoria's continued dependence that challenged the universal approval I had previously received for my generosity. Friends and colleagues were starting to express gentle doubts about whether my assistance was truly helping Victoria develop independence. The approaching engagement and wedding planning process would soon create external pressure for honest evaluation of financial priorities and family dynamics that could not be indefinitely postponed. Marriage would require clear discussions about financial boundaries and family obligations that would force conscious examination of patterns that had been operating automatically. The foundation for transformation had been carefully established through this period of increasing psychological tension and cognitive dissonance. The crisis that would eventually threaten my wedding fund would serve as catalyst for examining deep-seated beliefs and behavior patterns that had been operating below conscious awareness. The growth that would emerge from this crisis would require confronting uncomfortable truths about my motivations and accepting responsibility for enabling patterns that had prevented Victoria's development while satisfying my own psychological needs. The challenge to my carefully constructed justifications for supporting Victoria came from the most unexpected source possible: my fiancé, Michael Thompson. During the nearly 2 years of our relationship, Michael had never questioned my financial assistance to family members or expressed concern about my generous approach to helping Victoria through her career transition period. His silence on this matter had felt like tacit approval for my behavior, reinforcing my perception that my assistance represented appropriate family values rather than problematic enabling patterns. Michael possessed professional background in civil engineering that had taught him systematic approaches to problem-solving and careful analysis of structural stability over time. His engineering perspective emphasized understanding root causes of problems rather than implementing temporary fixes that might create greater instability in long-term applications. These analytical skills, which I had always admired in professional contexts, would soon be applied to family dynamics in ways that would fundamentally challenge my assumptions about helping Victoria. Our relationship had been built on shared values of financial responsibility, career dedication, and family commitment that made us highly compatible partners for marriage and joint life planning. We both understood the importance of establishing solid financial foundations before making major life commitments, and we had spent considerable time discussing our individual approaches to money management and family obligation during our courtship period. However, our discussions about family financial support had remained relatively abstract until Michael began observing the practical implementation of my assistance to Victoria during our engagement period. The increased frequency of her requests and the growing amounts involved created more obvious patterns that someone with analytical training could not easily overlook or dismiss through the emotional frameworks that had prevented my own objective evaluation. The conversation that would crack the foundation of my rationalization system occurred during a quiet Saturday morning in late February, approximately 6 months before our planned wedding date. Michael and I were reviewing our joint financial planning spreadsheet, which included projected wedding expenses, post-marriage budget allocations, and long-term savings goals that reflected our shared commitment to building stable economic foundation for our future family. During this financial planning session, Michael noted that my projected contributions to our joint savings account were lower than previously discussed amounts, requiring adjustment to our timeline for purchasing a house and establishing other financial goals we had identified as priorities for our first years of marriage. When I explained that recent increases in assistance to Victoria had temporarily reduced my available savings capacity, Michael's response would fundamentally challenge my assumptions about family support and financial boundaries. Michael approached my financial support of Victoria with the same systematic analysis that he applied to structural engineering problems, examining the foundation, load-bearing capacity, and long-term stability of the support system I had constructed. His engineering background provided analytical framework that was both objective and methodical, allowing him to identify structural weaknesses that emotional involvement had prevented me from recognizing. His first observation focused on the load-bearing analysis of my financial support system. In engineering terms, my assistance to Victoria represented ongoing structural load that was increasing over time rather than temporary loading that would be removed once structural repairs were completed. The fact that Victoria's financial requests had grown larger and more frequent indicated that my support was not strengthening her financial foundation, but rather creating greater dependence on external support systems. Michael noted that effective structural repairs required addressing root causes of instability rather than continuously adding external supports that compensated for underlying weaknesses. My financial assistance was functioning like temporary scaffolding that prevented immediate collapse, while preventing the necessary repairs that would create genuine structural integrity. Victoria's continued financial instability, despite substantial assistance, suggested that fundamental problems remained unaddressed. The engineering principle of material fatigue provided another framework for analyzing my support system. Continuous loading of any structure eventually creates stress fractures and material failure, even when individual loading events remain within acceptable parameters. The cumulative effect of ongoing financial assistance was creating stress on my own financial planning and potentially on our joint economic goals as married partners. From structural perspective, Michael observed that my support system lacked clear specifications for completion or success criteria that would indicate when external supports could be safely removed. Engineering projects required definitive metrics for evaluating effectiveness and predetermined conditions for transitioning from temporary supports to independent structural integrity. My assistance to Victoria operated without similar objective criteria, creating potential for indefinite continuation regardless of effectiveness. Most significantly, Michael identified potential foundation problems in Victoria's financial management that my surface-level assistance was not addressing. Just as structural repairs require examining foundation stability before adding upper-level supports, Victoria's employment and spending patterns represented foundation issues that external financial assistance could not resolve and might actually exacerbate through preventing necessary adjustments. Michael's analytical approach generated series of questions about my financial support for Victoria that I had never systematically considered despite my professional background in financial analysis. These questions challenged fundamental assumptions about the effectiveness and appropriateness of my assistance, while highlighting inconsistencies between my professional expertise and personal decision-making processes. The first question addressed measurable outcomes and success metrics for my financial investment in Victoria's career development. Michael asked what specific, quantifiable improvements in Victoria's employment situation or income stability would indicate that my assistance was achieving its intended objectives. He requested timeline projections for when Victoria might achieve financial independence, sufficient to eliminate need for ongoing support from family members. Michael also questioned the sustainability of my support system from perspective of our joint financial planning and future family obligations. He calculated that continuation of current assistance levels would significantly impact our ability to purchase a house, establish emergency savings as married couple, and eventually support children if we chose to start a family. These calculations forced consideration of opportunity costs that my individual financial planning had not adequately addressed. The strategic effectiveness of my approach became another area of Michael's questioning. He asked whether providing ongoing financial assistance was more effective than alternative support methods, such as career counseling, professional networking introductions, or temporary housing assistance that might address underlying causes of Victoria's financial instability rather than compensating for ongoing symptoms. Michael's engineering background also generated questions about feedback loops and system optimization in my support approach. He observed that Victoria's continued financial dependence despite substantial assistance suggested that the system was not producing desired outcomes and questioned whether modifications to my approach might achieve better results with reduced resource investment. Most challenging were Michael's questions about relationship dynamics and dependency creation within family systems. He asked whether my financial assistance was building Victoria's confidence and capabilities, or creating reliance patterns that might actually prevent her development of independent problem-solving skills and financial management abilities. Michael approached our discussion about Victoria's situation with same methodical preparation that characterized his professional engineering projects. He had been quietly observing patterns in Victoria's requests and my responses for several months, and he presented his analysis with objective data that was difficult to dismiss through emotional appeals or family obligation frameworks. His first evidence category focused on frequency and escalation trends in Victoria's financial requests over the 18-month period since my regular assistance had begun. Michael had constructed timelines showing steady increase in both number of requests per month and average amount requested, indicating pattern of dependency development rather than progress toward independence. This escalation trend contradicted narrative of temporary assistance during career transition period. Michael also presented analysis of Victoria's social media activity during periods when she had requested emergency financial assistance for basic living expenses. His review revealed discretionary spending on entertainment, dining, and personal items that seemed inconsistent with genuine financial hardship requiring family emergency intervention. This evidence suggested that my assistance was subsidizing lifestyle choices rather than providing crisis relief. The effectiveness analysis Michael conducted examined correlation between my financial assistance and Victoria's professional progress toward stable employment and income generation. His data showed minimal improvement in Victoria's employment consistency or earning capacity, despite receiving over $25,000 in support during the previous 18 months. This analysis challenged fundamental assumptions about investment value of my assistants. Michael's engineering background provided framework for analyzing load distribution and stress patterns in family financial systems. He demonstrated how my increased assistance to Victoria was creating stress on our joint financial planning, while potentially creating expectations among family members that could become problematic if life circumstances required modifications to my support capacity. Most compelling was Michael's comparison analysis between Victoria's situation and case studies of financial dependency in family systems that he had researched through professional and academic sources. These case studies consistently showed that ongoing financial assistance without clear boundaries and success criteria typically created greater dependency, rather than promoting independence, regardless of good intentions motivating the assistance. Michael's systematic challenge to my financial support of Victoria triggered immediate defensive reactions that revealed how psychologically invested I had become in maintaining my role as her financial rescuer. These defensive responses demonstrated the emotional protection systems I had unconsciously developed to preserve behavior patterns that served important psychological needs while avoiding uncomfortable recognition of their potential ineffectiveness. My initial reaction involved questioning Michael's right to evaluate my family relationships and financial decisions, particularly regarding support for family members he had known for a relatively short period compared to my lifetime relationship with Victoria. I argued that his engineering perspective was inappropriate for analyzing complex family dynamics that required understanding of cultural values and emotional factors rather than objective metrics and timeline projections. I also defended my assistance by emphasizing Victoria's genuine struggles and the legitimate obstacles she faced in establishing career stability within competitive creative industries. Michael's focus on patterns and trends seemed to minimize the real challenges Victoria experienced, and the meaningful relief my assistance provided during genuinely difficult periods that she had not created through poor decision-making or irresponsible behavior. The cultural framework provided another defensive strategy for resisting Michael's analysis of my support patterns. I explained traditional Chinese family values regarding mutual assistance and obligation to help family members during transition periods, arguing that his American cultural background limited his understanding of appropriate family financial relationships within my cultural context. My professional expertise became a defensive tool for dismissing Michael's concerns about effectiveness and sustainability of my assistance approach. I argued that my education and experience in financial analysis qualified me to evaluate investment strategies for family support better than his engineering background, which focused on structural systems rather than human behavioral and economic factors. Most emotionally, I defended my assistance by emphasizing the love and commitment that motivated my behavior, arguing that Michael's analytical approach failed to account for family loyalty and emotional bonds that made financial support feel natural and appropriate, regardless of measurable outcomes or systematic evaluation criteria. Michael's systematic challenge to my financial support patterns created cognitive dissonance that was increasingly difficult to resolve through existing rationalization mechanisms. His engineering approach provided alternative framework for understanding my assistance that highlighted inconsistencies between my stated objectives and actual outcomes, while questioning fundamental assumptions about effectiveness and appropriateness of my approach. The professional competence dissonance became particularly troubling as Michael's analysis revealed gap between my analytical skills in work contexts and my emotional decision-making regarding family financial relationships. My ability to evaluate investment strategies objectively for clients contrasted sharply with my apparently compromised judgment regarding financial assistance to Victoria, creating uncomfortable questions about consistency and self-awareness. The outcome effectiveness dissonance forced recognition that 18 months of substantial financial assistance had not produced measurable progress toward Victoria's financial independence, despite my careful tracking and strategic approach to support provision. Michael's timeline analysis made this lack of progress impossible to dismiss as temporary setback or external complication requiring patience and continued investment. The relationship impact dissonance highlighted potential conflict between my assistance to Victoria and my commitment to building strong financial foundation with Michael for our future family. His calculations demonstrated that continuation of current support levels would significantly compromise our ability to achieve joint financial goals, forcing consideration of priority conflicts I had not previously acknowledged. The cultural values dissonance emerged as Michael's questions challenged whether my assistance actually reflected traditional family values or represented enabling behavior that contradicted deeper cultural principles about developing independence and taking responsibility for personal circumstances. This questioning threatened identity foundations I had constructed around family loyalty and cultural authenticity. Most destabilizing was the self-knowledge dissonance created by Michael's observation that my psychological investment in being Victoria's financial rescuer might be serving my own emotional needs more than her actual development requirements. This possibility challenged core assumptions about my motivations and character, while suggesting that behavior I considered virtuous might actually be self-serving. The combination of Michael's systematic analysis and the cognitive dissonance it generated created first genuine doubts about whether my financial assistance to Victoria was achieving its intended objectives, or might actually be preventing her development of independence and financial management capabilities. These doubts were initially subtle and easily suppressed, but they represented crack in rationalization foundation that would gradually expand under pressure of continued evidence. The effectiveness doubts focused on lack of correlation between my substantial financial investment and Victoria's progress toward stable employment or income generation. Michael's timeline analysis made this absence of improvement difficult to explain through external factors or temporary setbacks, suggesting that fundamental assumptions about my support strategy might be incorrect. The sustainability doubts addressed long-term implications of continued assistance for both Victoria's development and my own financial planning capacity. Michael's projections demonstrated that indefinite continuation of current support levels would compromise important personal and joint financial objectives while potentially creating permanent dependency patterns rather than temporary assistance during transition period. The relationship impact doubts concerned potential effects of my assistance patterns on Victoria's motivation and self-confidence regarding her ability to achieve financial independence through her own efforts. Michael's questions about dependency creation forced consideration of whether my help was building or undermining Victoria's belief in her own capabilities and resourcefulness. The family system doubts addressed broader implications of my support approach for family dynamics and expectations that might affect other relationships and future situations requiring boundary setting or resource allocation decisions. Michael's analysis suggested that my assistance had created precedents and expectations that could become problematic if circumstances required modifications to support capacity. Most troubling were the self-awareness doubts concerning my motivations and psychological investment in maintaining Victoria's dependence on my financial assistance. Michael's observation that my identity as helpful family member might be influencing my decision-making in ways that served my emotional needs rather than Victoria's best interests forced uncomfortable self-examination of behavior I had considered entirely altruistic. The doubts created by Michael's analysis motivated first systematic research into family financial assistance patterns and their long-term effects on both recipients and providers of ongoing support. This research represented departure from emotional decision-making based on immediate gratitude and family obligation toward objective evaluation of strategies and outcomes that characterized my professional analytical work. Professional literature on family financial assistance revealed consistent patterns showing that ongoing support without clear boundaries and success criteria typically created dependency rather than promoting independence, regardless of good intentions motivating the assistance. These findings contradicted my assumptions about investment value of continued financial support for Victoria's career development. Psychology research on enabling behavior within family systems provided framework for understanding how well-intentioned assistance could prevent development of coping skills and financial management capabilities that were essential for long-term stability and success. This research suggested that my support might be inadvertently undermining Victoria's confidence and motivation regarding her ability to solve problems independently. Economic studies on young adult financial development demonstrated importance of experiencing natural consequences of financial decisions for learning money management skills and developing realistic expectations about lifestyle costs relative to earning capacity. My assistance was potentially preventing Victoria from learning lessons that temporary financial difficulty might teach more effectively than continued external support. Cultural research on family obligation and financial assistance revealed that traditional values emphasized supporting family members toward independence rather than maintaining dependence, suggesting that my assistance approach might actually contradict deeper cultural principles despite surface alignment with family loyalty concepts. Case studies of successful transitions from family financial assistance to independence showed consistent importance of clear timelines, specific success criteria, and gradual reduction of support rather than open-ended assistance without defined completion conditions. These successful approaches contrasted sharply with my current strategy of responding to individual requests without systematic plan for transition to independence. Michael's challenge to my financial support patterns had introduced tension into our relationship that reflected broader questions about financial boundaries, family obligations, and decision-making processes that would affect our marriage and joint financial planning. This tension required careful navigation to preserve our relationship while addressing legitimate concerns about sustainability and effectiveness of my assistance approach. The communication patterns around Victoria's financial requests became area of ongoing discussion, as Michael requested advance consultation about assistance decisions that would affect our joint financial capacity. His preference for collaborative decision-making conflicted with my established pattern of responding immediately to Victoria's requests, without extensive deliberation or outside input. The priority-setting discussions revealed different approaches to balancing family obligation with personal financial goals that required negotiation and compromise to develop mutually acceptable framework for post-marriage financial relationships. Michael's emphasis on joint goals and systematic planning conflicted with my flexible response to family needs and crisis-driven assistance patterns. The boundary establishment conversations highlighted need for clear agreements about limits on family financial assistance that would protect our joint financial capacity while maintaining appropriate family relationships. These discussions forced explicit consideration of questions I had avoided through individual decision-making and emotional response to immediate situations. The family integration challenges required helping Michael understand cultural values and family dynamics that influenced my approach to supporting Victoria while addressing his legitimate concerns about effectiveness and sustainability of ongoing assistance. This integration process demanded honest examination of motivations and outcomes that had been protected through individual decision-making. Most significantly, the trust and communication issues around financial transparency required establishing systems for discussing family assistance decisions before implementation rather than informing Michael after commitments had been made. This transparency requirement forced recognition that my individual financial decisions had implications for our joint future that required collaborative consideration and mutual agreement. The foundation for change had been established through Michael's systematic challenge to assumptions I had protected through emotional decision-making and cultural justification. The cracks in my rationalization system would continue expanding under pressure of continued evidence and analysis, eventually requiring fundamental examination of beliefs and behaviors that had become central to my identity and family relationships. The transformation ahead would test my willingness to prioritize long-term effectiveness over short-term comfort, while learning to distinguish between helping and enabling within family systems. The cognitive dissonance created by Michael's analysis had planted seeds of doubt that demanded thorough investigation rather than continued emotional decision-making. My professional training in financial analysis provided the methodological framework necessary for objective evaluation of my assistance patterns, but applying these analytical skills to family relationships required deliberate effort to overcome psychological resistance and emotional investment in maintaining comfortable assumptions. I began the investigation process by establishing clear analytical parameters that would guide systematic data collection and evaluation. The investigation would examine three primary areas: measurable outcomes from my financial assistance, Victoria's actual progress toward independence, and the broader system effects of my support patterns on family dynamics and my own financial planning capacity. The first phase involved comprehensive documentation of all financial assistance I had provided to Victoria since her college graduation 3 years earlier. My existing tracking system had categorized assistance by purpose and amount, but I expanded this analysis to include correlation studies between assistance timing and Victoria's employment status, income generation, and financial decision-making patterns. This documentation process revealed that my total financial support for Victoria exceeded $32,000 over 36 months, representing substantial investment that should have produced measurable progress toward financial independence if my strategic assumptions were correct. The magnitude of this investment demanded rigorous evaluation of returns and effectiveness using the same analytical standards I applied to professional investment recommendations. The second phase focused on correlation analysis between my assistance and Victoria's behavioral patterns regarding employment, spending, and financial planning. This analysis required examining her social media activity, employment history, and lifestyle choices during periods when she received financial support compared to periods of relative independence. The third phase involved comparative analysis of Victoria's situation relative to peer groups and alternative support strategies that might achieve better outcomes with reduced resource investment. This comparison would help determine whether Victoria's continued financial struggles reflected normal adjustment challenges for young adults in creative industries or indicated systemic problems with my support approach. The systematic examination of Victoria's employment history revealed troubling patterns that contradicted my assumptions about the relationship between financial support and career development progress. Rather than building towards stable employment and increasing income capacity, Victoria's work patterns showed declining consistency and reduced commitment to professional development during periods of increased financial assistance from me. During the initial 6 months following her college graduation, when my financial support was minimal and sporadic, Victoria had maintained more consistent employment and demonstrated greater initiative in seeking professional opportunities. She worked full-time temporary positions while actively pursuing freelance projects and networking opportunities that generated additional income and professional contacts. However, as my financial assistance increased and became more predictable, Victoria's employment patterns showed corresponding decline in consistency and professional ambition. She began accepting part-time positions that provided flexible schedules for personal activities, rather than pursuing full-time opportunities that might lead to career advancement and financial stability. The correlation between increased financial support and decreased employment commitment was particularly evident during months when I provided substantial assistance for professional development activities. Rather than using these investments to build toward greater employment success, Victoria appeared to treat my support as income replacement that reduced urgency about securing stable employment or building client relationships. Most concerning was the pattern showing that Victoria's freelance income actually decreased during periods when my financial support was highest. This inverse relationship suggested that my assistance was reducing her motivation to pursue income-generating activities rather than providing foundation for professional growth and development. The employment analysis also revealed that Victoria had declined several promising job opportunities during the 18 months of regular support, citing reasons that seemed designed to maintain flexibility for personal activities rather than reflecting legitimate professional considerations. These declined opportunities might have provided the stable income and career development that my financial support was intended to facilitate. The investigation into Victoria's spending patterns during periods of financial assistance revealed significant disconnection between her stated financial needs and actual expenditure priorities. This analysis required examining credit card statements, social media activity, and lifestyle choices that demonstrated how my assistance was actually being utilized compared to the emergency relief and professional development purposes I believed it served. Victoria's discretionary spending patterns showed consistent expenditures on entertainment, dining, and personal items that exceeded reasonable levels for someone experiencing genuine financial hardship requiring family emergency assistance. Restaurant meals, concert tickets, shopping trips, and social activities appeared regularly during periods when she had requested help with basic living expenses such as rent and utilities. The timing analysis revealed particularly troubling patterns where significant discretionary expenditures occurred within days of receiving financial assistance for stated emergencies. These patterns suggested that my support was being used to maintain lifestyle standards, rather than addressing genuine financial crises that threatened her basic welfare and housing security. Technology and equipment purchases presented another area where Victoria's stated professional development needs appeared to exceed actual requirements for her current level of freelance work. High-end software subscriptions, premium equipment upgrades, and professional tools that exceeded her immediate client needs suggested that my assistance was funding aspirational purchases rather than practical investments in career development. Travel and social expenditures during periods of claimed financial hardship indicated that Victoria's financial management priorities differed significantly from the emergency relief framework that motivated my assistance. Weekend trips, social events, and entertainment activities that required substantial discretionary spending occurred regularly during months when she requested help with basic living costs. The analysis also revealed that Victoria had not established emergency savings or implemented basic financial management practices, despite receiving substantial assistance that should have provided opportunities for building financial reserves and developing money management skills. This absence of progress toward financial responsibility suggested that my support was preventing rather than encouraging development of essential life skills. Victoria's social media activity provided objective documentation of lifestyle choices and spending patterns that contradicted the financial hardship narrative that motivated my assistance. This digital evidence revealed consistent disconnection between her stated financial circumstances and actual lifestyle maintenance that would have been impossible without external financial support. Instagram posts during periods of claimed financial emergency showed regular dining at expensive restaurants, attendance at paid entertainment events, and purchases of clothing and accessories that required discretionary spending incompatible with genuine financial crisis. These posts were often published within days of receiving financial assistance for basic living expenses. Facebook activity revealed social commitments and activities that required ongoing discretionary spending for transportation, entertainment, and social participation that seemed inconsistent with someone struggling to cover basic housing and utility costs. The frequency and nature of these activities suggested lifestyle expectations that exceeded her earning capacity. Professional networking posts on LinkedIn showed Victoria presenting herself as successfully establishing freelance business, while simultaneously requesting family financial assistance for professional development and basic living expenses. This presentation inconsistency suggested either deliberate misrepresentation of her situation or lack of awareness about the contradictions between her public professional image and private financial reality. The temporal correlation between social media posts showing discretionary activities and my financial assistance timing was particularly troubling. Entertainment activities, dining experiences, and social events frequently appeared on Victoria's accounts within 72 hours of receiving financial support for stated emergencies or professional development needs. Shopping posts and product reviews demonstrated regular purchases of non-essential items during periods when Victoria had requested assistance with basic living costs. These purchases suggested that my financial support was enabling lifestyle maintenance rather than providing emergency relief during temporary financial difficulties. The systematic evaluation of professional development investments I had funded for Victoria revealed minimal correlation between my financial support and measurable improvements in her career prospects, client base, or income generation capacity. This analysis examined whether conferences, courses, equipment, and networking opportunities had produced tangible returns that justified continued investment in her professional development. Conference attendance that I had funded showed no measurable increase in client acquisition or professional networking outcomes that translated to improved employment opportunities. Victoria's post-conference reports emphasized social and personal benefits rather than concrete professional advancement or business development results that would indicate effective utilization of these expensive professional development opportunities. Professional course investments had not resulted in skill certifications, portfolio improvements, or client service capabilities that enhanced Victoria's competitive positioning in the graphic design market. Despite funding multiple courses over 18 months, her client base remained small and unstable, suggesting that education was not addressing fundamental barriers to professional success. Equipment and software purchases had not translated to increased project capacity or improved service offerings that would justify the substantial investment in professional tools. Victoria's freelance income remained sporadic and low, despite having access to high-quality equipment that should have enabled higher-paying projects and more efficient work processes. Networking event attendance had not generated ongoing professional relationships or referral sources that would indicate successful professional community integration. The absence of measurable networking outcomes suggested that Victoria was treating these events as social, rather than professional development opportunities. The lack of measurable professional advancement, despite substantial investment in development activities, indicated that external barriers were not the primary factors limiting Victoria's career progress. Internal factors such as motivation, commitment, and professional discipline appeared to be more significant obstacles than lack of resources or opportunities. The investigation expanded to examine how my financial support for Victoria was affecting broader family dynamics and creating systemic patterns that extended beyond our individual relationship. This analysis revealed that my assistance had created expectations and dependencies that were influencing other family relationships and potentially establishing problematic precedents for future family financial interactions. Our parents had begun incorporating my financial support for Victoria into their own retirement planning, viewing my assistance as family resource that reduced pressure on their fixed income while enabling Victoria's career development. This integration created additional stakeholders in maintaining my support patterns and increased resistance to any modifications that might shift financial responsibility back to parental resources. Extended family members had begun expressing expectations that successful family members would provide similar assistance to struggling relatives, using my support for Victoria as precedent for requesting help with their own financial challenges. This precedent expansion threatened to create indefinite obligations that could compromise my financial planning capacity and marriage preparation. Victoria's dependency on my assistance had begun affecting her relationship with our parents by reducing her motivation to accept parental guidance or implement recommended changes to her employment and spending patterns. My financial support provided alternative to parental oversight and natural consequences that might have encouraged better decision-making and increased responsibility. The family communication patterns around Victoria's financial situation had shifted to accommodate and normalize ongoing assistance, rather than focusing on strategies for achieving independence. Family discussions emphasized supporting Victoria through difficult transition periods, rather than establishing expectations and timelines for self-sufficiency. Most concerning was evidence that my assistance was creating resentment among family members who were managing their own financial challenges without external support. Several relatives had made comments suggesting that Victoria received preferential treatment that was not available to other family members facing similar difficulties. The comprehensive analysis of my financial assistance to Victoria revealed significant impact on my own financial planning capacity and progress toward personal and joint goals with Michael. This impact extended beyond the direct costs of assistance to include opportunity costs and delayed achievement of important financial milestones. The direct financial cost of $32,000 in assistance over 36 months represented substantial diversion of resources from my wedding fund, emergency savings, and retirement contributions. This amount could have been invested in appreciating assets or used to accelerate progress toward home ownership and other financial objectives that would benefit my long-term economic security. The opportunity cost analysis showed that investment of assistance amounts in retirement accounts or other long-term vehicles would have generated significant returns over time through compound growth. The financial support for Victoria represented not only current expenditure but also foregone future wealth accumulation that would affect my financial security throughout my career and retirement. The wedding planning impact had become increasingly apparent, as my targeted savings rate for wedding expenses had declined due to increased assistance to Victoria. The original timeline for accumulating wedding funds had been extended by approximately 8 months due to diverted resources, affecting planning schedules, and potentially compromising desired venue and vendor selections. Joint financial planning with Michael had been complicated by unpredictable assistance expenditures that affected my contribution capacity to shared savings goals and future planning objectives. The irregular nature of Victoria's requests made budgeting and financial forecasting difficult for joint planning purposes. The stress and decision fatigue associated with regular financial assistance requests was affecting my professional performance and personal well-being in ways that had indirect financial implications through reduced work effectiveness and increased personal stress management requirements. The investigation included research into alternative support strategies that might achieve better outcomes for Victoria's development, while requiring reduced financial investment and creating sustainable assistance frameworks. This research examined successful models for family support that promoted independence rather than maintaining dependency. Professional counseling and career coaching services provided structured approaches to addressing underlying factors that prevented career advancement and financial stability. These services cost significantly less than ongoing financial assistance, while focusing on skill development and behavioral change that could produce lasting improvements in Victoria's employment and income capacity. Time-limited financial assistance with clear success criteria and graduation timelines offered framework for providing temporary support while maintaining focus on independence objectives. This approach required explicit agreements about assistance duration and measurable progress indicators that would guide transition to self-sufficiency. Professional development assistance that focused on specific, measurable skill acquisition rather than general education could provide targeted support for addressing identified barriers to employment success. This approach would link assistance directly to competency development and employment outcomes, rather than providing open-ended support for aspirational activities. Collaborative goal-setting and accountability partnerships could provide support and encouragement for Victoria's career development without creating financial dependency. These approaches emphasized personal responsibility and self-motivation, while providing family support through guidance and emotional encouragement, rather than financial rescue. Structured mentorship relationships with professionals in Victoria's field could provide networking opportunities and career guidance that would be more valuable than financial assistance for professional development. These relationships could offer practical advice and industry connections without creating dependency on family financial resources. The systematic investigation had produced overwhelming evidence that my financial assistance to Victoria was creating dependency, rather than promoting independence, enabling lifestyle choices that exceeded her earning capacity and preventing development of financial management skills and professional discipline necessary for genuine career success. This evidence could no longer be dismissed through emotional appeals or cultural justification frameworks. The correlation between increased financial support and decreased professional commitment demonstrated that my assistance was reducing rather than enhancing Victoria's motivation to achieve financial independence. This inverse relationship contradicted fundamental assumptions about the investment value of family financial support for career development. The lifestyle maintenance function of my assistance revealed that Victoria had come to view my support as income replacement rather than emergency relief, creating expectations and entitlement attitudes that made future boundary setting increasingly difficult and potentially relationship damaging. The absence of measurable progress toward financial independence despite substantial investment indicated that external barriers were not the primary factors limiting Victoria's success. Internal factors such as motivation, discipline, and personal responsibility appeared to be more significant obstacles than lack of resources or opportunities. The family system effects of my assistance had created stakeholder investment in maintaining dependency rather than promoting independence, making any changes to support patterns potentially disruptive to multiple relationships and family dynamics. Most painfully, the evidence suggested that my psychological investment in being Victoria's financial rescuer was serving my own emotional needs more than her actual development requirements. The investigation revealed that my assistance was maintaining comfortable family dynamics and identity validation, rather than promoting genuine growth and independence. The foundation for transformation had been established through systematic analysis that could not be dismissed through emotional rationalization or cultural justification. The uncomfortable truths revealed by investigation would require fundamental changes in my approach to family relationships and financial boundaries, changes that would test my willingness to prioritize long-term effectiveness over short-term comfort and family harmony. The comprehensive investigation had produced irrefutable documentation that my financial assistance to Victoria was creating dependency rather than promoting independence. Yet accepting these findings required confronting fundamental assumptions about my identity, family relationships, and personal worth that had guided my behavior for decades. The psychological resistance to this evidence was immediate and powerful, manifesting through sophisticated defense mechanisms designed to preserve my self-image and comfortable family dynamics. My initial response to the investigation findings involved questioning the methodology and interpretation of data that contradicted my emotional investment in supporting Victoria. Despite applying the same analytical standards that I used professionally, I found myself generating alternative explanations for correlation patterns and outcome measurements that challenged my assistance approach. This intellectual dishonesty represented departure from professional integrity that highlighted the emotional stakes involved in maintaining my role as Victoria's financial rescuer. The cognitive dissonance between objective evidence and emotional attachment to helping Victoria created internal tension that was difficult to resolve through rational analysis. My professional training emphasized data-driven decision-making and objective evaluation of investment effectiveness, yet applying these principles to family relationships felt cold and inappropriate, despite their obvious relevance to resource allocation and outcome assessment. The identity threat posed by investigation findings was particularly destabilizing because financial generosity toward family members had become central to my self-concept and social positioning within both family and professional circles. Acknowledging that my assistance was counterproductive required accepting that behavior I considered virtuous and caring was actually enabling and potentially harmful to the person I most wanted to help. The family loyalty framework provided powerful resistance to changing assistance patterns because traditional values emphasized supporting struggling family members regardless of outcomes or effectiveness measures. Cultural expectations about family obligation made reducing financial assistance feel like betraying fundamental values and disappointing parental expectations about successful children supporting less fortunate siblings. Most insidiously, the investigation findings threatened my sense of control and competence in relationships that provided important psychological rewards. Being needed and appreciated by Victoria served emotional needs that made her independence feel like personal loss rather than positive outcome, creating unconscious motivation to maintain dependency rather than promote self-sufficiency. Confronted with evidence that challenged my fundamental assumptions about family financial assistance, I engaged in increasingly sophisticated rationalization processes designed to preserve existing behavior patterns while acknowledging apparent problems revealed by systematic analysis. These rationalizations became more elaborate and creative as the evidence became more compelling, demonstrating the psychological investment in maintaining comfortable assumptions despite contradictory data. The timing rationalization involved arguing that 18 months represented insufficient duration for measuring success of professional development investments, particularly in creative industries where career establishment required longer timeframes than traditional employment paths. This reasoning suggested that premature evaluation was preventing recognition of positive outcomes that would become apparent with continued patience and support. The external factor rationalization emphasized economic conditions and industry challenges that created obstacles beyond Victoria's control, making her continued struggles evidence of difficult circumstances rather than ineffective assistance strategies. Market conditions, competition levels, and economic uncertainty provided convenient explanations for poor outcomes that protected assumptions about investment effectiveness, while avoiding examination of internal factors that might respond to different support approaches. The measurement limitation rationalization questioned whether quantitative analysis could capture qualitative benefits of family support that transcended financial metrics and employment statistics. This reasoning suggested that emotional support, family bonding, and cultural value reinforcement provided returns that justified continued assistance, regardless of measurable outcomes in career advancement or financial independence. The alternative outcome rationalization proposed that Victoria's current situation would be significantly worse without my assistance, making continued support successful intervention regardless of absolute progress toward independence. This framework emphasized prevention of negative outcomes rather than promotion of positive achievements, creating lower standards for effectiveness that supported continued assistance. The gradual progress rationalization identified minor improvements and positive developments that could indicate eventual success despite overall lack of substantial advancement toward financial independence. Small increases in freelance income, occasional employment opportunities, and professional development activities were emphasized as evidence of building momentum that justified continued investment. The relationship investment rationalization framed ongoing assistance as building long-term family bonds and trust that would provide lifetime benefits transcending immediate financial considerations. This reasoning suggested that supporting Victoria during difficult periods would create permanent family loyalty and mutual support networks that justified short-term costs and lack of immediate returns. The contradiction between my professional expertise in financial analysis and my personal financial assistance patterns created cognitive dissonance that required sophisticated compartmentalization to maintain both competencies simultaneously. This psychological separation allowed me to apply rigorous analytical standards in professional contexts while suspending similar evaluation criteria for family financial relationships. Professional client interactions emphasized data-driven decision-making, objective measurement of investment effectiveness, and clear timelines for evaluating success or failure of financial strategies. These standards had earned reputation for analytical competence and strategic thinking that formed foundation of my career advancement and professional identity. However, applying identical standards to Victoria's situation felt inappropriate and potentially damaging to family relationships. The compartmentalization process involved creating separate evaluation frameworks for professional and personal financial decisions that used different criteria and measurement standards. Professional investments required clear success metrics and predetermined exit strategies, while family assistance operated under open-ended support models that emphasized loyalty and commitment over effectiveness and outcomes. This separation was reinforced by different stakeholder expectations and feedback systems that operated in professional versus family contexts. Professional decisions were evaluated by clients and supervisors who prioritized results and efficiency, while family decisions were assessed by relatives who valued generosity and emotional support regardless of practical effectiveness. The compartmentalization also protected professional reputation from potential criticism about family financial management that might undermine credibility with clients and colleagues. Maintaining separation between professional analytical competence and personal family assistance patterns prevented questions about consistency and decision-making capability that could affect career advancement. However, this psychological separation created internal tension that was increasingly difficult to maintain as the investigation evidence accumulated. The gap between professional standards and personal behavior highlighted inconsistencies that challenged fundamental assumptions about character and competence that formed foundation of my identity across all life domains. The investigation findings and growing doubts about assistance effectiveness occurred within family system that had adapted to incorporate my financial support as fundamental component of household economic dynamics. This systemic integration created multiple sources of pressure and resistance to changing assistance patterns that extended beyond my individual psychological investment in maintaining supportive behavior. Our parents had modified their retirement planning and discretionary spending to account for my financial support of Victoria, viewing my assistance as family resource that reduced pressure on their fixed income while enabling Victoria's career development pursuits. Their financial planning assumed continuation of my support, making any reduction potentially disruptive to parental financial security and family economic stability. Victoria had integrated my assistance into her lifestyle expectations and financial planning in ways that made sudden changes potentially traumatic and relationship damaging. Her housing arrangements, social activities, and professional development plans assumed continued access to my financial support, creating practical obstacles to implementing boundaries that could be interpreted as abandonment or betrayal. Extended family members had begun viewing my assistance to Victoria as evidence of family financial capacity and values that created expectations about similar support for other relatives facing difficulties. This precedent expansion threatened to create additional obligations that could compromise my financial planning while establishing my assistance as family entitlement rather than personal choice. The family communication patterns had evolved to accommodate and normalize ongoing assistance discussions rather than focusing on independent strategies and self-sufficiency planning. Family gatherings routinely included Victoria's financial challenges and my support responses as standard topics, making reduction of assistance feel like disrupting established family dynamics and relationships. Cultural expectations within our community emphasized successful family members supporting struggling relatives as evidence of proper values and family loyalty. These external pressures reinforced internal resistance to reducing assistance, while making boundary setting appear selfish and culturally inappropriate to community members whose opinions affected family social standing. As my investigation evidence mounted and doubts about assistance effectiveness increased, Victoria's requests for financial support began incorporating more sophisticated emotional manipulation techniques that exploited my psychological investment in family relationships and fear of disappointing people I cared about. These manipulation strategies became more apparent once I began analyzing them systematically, rather than responding emotionally to immediate presentations. The urgency escalation technique involved presenting routine expenses as immediate crises requiring emergency intervention to prevent catastrophic consequences. These presentations created artificial time pressure that prevented careful consideration of requests while exploiting my desire to help family members avoid suffering and distress. The professional opportunity framing transformed lifestyle expenses and discretionary purchases into career advancement investments that would be lost without immediate financial support. These presentations exploited my professional background and investment mindset, while making refusal feel like preventing Victoria's success and career development. The family loyalty appeals emphasized my role as successful family member with responsibility to support struggling relatives, particularly during critical periods that could determine future outcomes. These appeals exploited cultural values and family identity, while making assistance refusal feel like betraying fundamental principles and disappointing parental expectations. The gratitude and appreciation expressions became more elaborate and frequent as my resistance to requests increased, acknowledging my generosity and sacrifice, while reinforcing emotional rewards that made assistance psychologically satisfying despite questionable effectiveness. The guilt induction techniques emphasized potential consequences of assistance refusal that would make me responsible for negative outcomes affecting Victoria's welfare and future prospects. These presentations created psychological pressure by making non-assistance feel cruel and selfish rather than appropriate boundary maintenance. The comparison and precedent references highlighted previous assistance instances and family support patterns to establish expectations and obligations that made current refusal inconsistent with established behavior and values. These techniques exploited consistency principles and prior commitment psychology to maintain assistance patterns. The internal conflict between investigation evidence and emotional investment in supporting Victoria motivated increased seeking of external validation for assistance patterns from social and professional networks that might counteract growing doubts about effectiveness and appropriateness. This validation-seeking represented an attempt to restore confidence in behavior that systematic analysis had revealed as problematic. Professional colleague consultations about family financial assistance generally supported continued help for struggling relatives, particularly when framed in terms of family values and cultural obligation, rather than investment effectiveness and outcome measurement. These discussions reinforced cultural narratives about family support, while avoiding systematic analysis of results and long-term implications. Friend conversations about family relationships emphasized emotional bonds and loyalty considerations that supported continued assistance regardless of practical outcomes or financial effectiveness. Social networks provided validation for generous behavior, while discouraging analytical evaluation that might challenge comfortable assumptions about helping family members. Cultural community discussions about family obligation and intergenerational support reinforced traditional values that emphasized supporting struggling family members as evidence of proper character and family commitment. These conversations provided cultural justification for continued assistance, while minimizing importance of effectiveness measurement and independence promotion. Online research and forum discussions about family financial assistance revealed diverse perspectives, but generally supported helping struggling relatives during transition periods. However, these discussions often lacked systematic analysis of long-term outcomes and effectiveness measurement that characterized professional investment evaluation. Professional literature about family financial assistance provided mixed guidance that could be interpreted to support various approaches depending on emphasis and selection criteria. The ambiguous nature of this guidance allowed selection of sources that supported continued assistance, while avoiding research that challenged effectiveness assumptions. Religious and spiritual counseling emphasized compassion and generosity toward family members that supported continued assistance, regardless of practical outcomes or effectiveness measurement. These discussions provided moral framework for maintaining assistance, while discouraging evaluation based on secular effectiveness criteria. Rather than reducing assistance in response to investigation evidence, my psychological resistance led to escalation and entrenchment that increased rather than decreased financial support for Victoria. This paradoxical response demonstrated how emotional investment and identity protection could override rational analysis and professional expertise when family relationships were involved. The compensation escalation involved providing larger amounts of assistance to compensate for growing doubts about effectiveness, creating logic that increased investment would eventually produce positive outcomes that would justify overall strategy. This approach reflected sunk cost fallacy and escalation of commitment principles that prevented rational evaluation of assistance effectiveness. The scope expansion included new categories of assistance and broader definitions of appropriate support that increased rather than decreased financial involvement in Victoria's affairs. Professional development, lifestyle maintenance, and social activities all became legitimate areas for family financial assistance as rationalization frameworks expanded to encompass broader support obligations. The timeline extension involved adjusting expectations about achievement of independence to accommodate continued assistance without admitting strategy failure. Career development timelines were extended indefinitely, while independence objectives became increasingly vague and unmeasurable, preventing evaluation of progress or success. The involvement intensification included increased participation in Victoria's financial planning and decision-making processes that created greater rather than reduced family financial integration. This increased involvement reinforced psychological investment while creating additional obligations and expectations that made boundary setting more difficult. The justification sophistication involved developing more elaborate theoretical frameworks for explaining assistance effectiveness despite lack of measurable outcomes. These frameworks became increasingly complex and removed from practical reality, while providing intellectual cover for continued emotional decision-making. Despite intensive psychological resistance and rationalization efforts, the warning signs of assistance ineffectiveness and dependency creation continued accumulating in ways that became increasingly difficult to ignore or explain away through emotional frameworks and cultural justification. These warning signs created mounting pressure that would eventually require acknowledgement and response regardless of psychological comfort or family dynamics. Victoria's requests for assistance had become more frequent and assumed rather than requested, indicating that my support had transformed from emergency relief to expected income that was integrated into her financial planning and lifestyle maintenance. This transformation contradicted emergency assistance rationale and suggested permanent dependency rather than temporary support during transition periods. The amounts requested had increased substantially over time, while justifications became less detailed and urgent, suggesting that Victoria's comfort level with requesting assistance had grown stronger rather than weaker, despite extended support period. This pattern indicated dependency development rather than progress toward independence. Victoria's employment commitment had decreased rather than increased during periods of highest assistance, creating inverse correlation between financial support and professional development that contradicted investment effectiveness assumptions. This relationship suggested that assistance was reducing rather than enhancing motivation for career advancement. The lifestyle expectations had inflated rather than adjusted to reflect Victoria's actual earning capacity, indicating that assistance was enabling unrealistic standards rather than promoting appropriate adjustment to financial circumstances. This inflation prevented development of realistic expectations and financial discipline necessary for independence. Family financial planning had become dependent on my continued assistance, rather than developing alternative support systems or independent strategies, creating systemic pressure for maintaining assistance regardless of effectiveness or sustainability. This dependency threatened family financial stability and my own economic planning capacity. The investigation evidence and warning sign accumulation had created crisis of assumptions and identity that could no longer be resolved through rationalization and emotional resistance. The foundation for fundamental change had been established through systematic analysis that demanded acknowledgement and response regardless of psychological comfort or family relationship implications. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.